Joining us now to make heads or tails of the brackets. I'm holding it in my hand. Here's a bracket. Let's start filling it out one by one. No, I'm not going to use that time with Seth Davis. Sorry, Chris. We're just not going to have him fill out the brackets.
It might help us out, actually, pick a winner.
Getting ready for March Madness, the men's tournament from CBS Sports and so many others. Seth Davis, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, Rich. I'm enjoying my brief span of relevance here these next couple of weeks. And then I disappear.
Oh, stop it. You've got a best-selling book out with Rex Chapman, which I can't wait to talk with you about in our conversation that now kicks off with our brackets. When you get the brackets, you look for what? What's the first thing you look for when you get the brackets, Seth?
I'm so immersed in this stuff, Rich, and we only get the bracket, maybe 10 to 12 minutes before the start of the selection show because the conference games are still finishing up. So I don't have a lot of time to fill it out. I just take it. I literally fill it out in about 4 minutes, which is, I think a pretty good way to do it. I think the more I think about it, the worse my picks would have been, although they're usually pretty bad anyway. So you really matchups is what it comes down to for me. I mean, I look for sort of those 12-5 upsets, 13-4. That's your most common first round, quote unquote upset. So I kind of look for those. But I just watched these teams all season long and followed it so closely that whatever jumps out at me, whatever I think. And I tend to go with early round upsets and then chalk later in the tournament. Some years it worked. Last year, obviously it didn't. The year before it did. So who knows? It's a lot of fun, and I just freewheel it.
Okay, so do you think the committee got it right with the top seeds, with the overall top seed? What do you think at the very top?
This is going to get into the weeds for the bracket nerds, but I think a lot of people are not necessarily aware that the committee actually seeds teams 1 through 68 all the way through. And then they start putting them into the bracket based on their principles. And the first principle is geography. You go to your closest place. And so as the weekend went on, when Iowa State drilled Houston by 30, when you put, Iowa State and North Carolina had the exact same record against the first two quadrants in the net. Iowa State had better wins, including 2 over Houston. Iowa State had a much worse non-conference strength of schedule, but its overall strength of schedule was very comparable. So you could go either way on it. I had Iowa State as a 1. The committee went with North Carolina as a 1. Zygazun, not that big of a deal. But on the overall, nice. I knew you'd like that. Yeah. On the overall seed list, Iowa State was number 8. Which means they were 1 slot away from being a 3 seed. Now, why is that significant? Because if they were a 5, they would end up in Detroit against Purdue, much more geographically better for them. Instead, they have to go to Boston to play UConn, of course, assuming everybody goes that far. So you're paired against the team that's the favorite in the tournament, and you have to go play them in Boston. I think the committee was maybe trying to make a statement about that non-conference strength of schedule, but I don't think you should be making statements. I think you should be going on the overall performance. Having said that, you're going to hear a lot of teams who are on the bubble who didn't get in talk about how they got robbed. Oh, this and that. And look, I didn't have Virginia in the tournament. I don't think Virginia did enough to be in. But if you are on the bubble, you have put the game in the hands of the refs. And one thing that happened over the weekend, Rich, is we had 5 teams, including New Mexico, which is a little bit of a surprise, but 5 teams that won their conference tournament who would not have been in the NCAA tournament if they hadn't won their conference tournament. So that means 5 at-large spots were taken off of the board because you still have, like Dayton and the Atlantic 10 still got the at-large bid. So the Atlantic 10 got 2 teams in instead of 1, 5. Last year there was only 1. Year before there was only 2. So Indiana State was the 3rd team out of this tournament, which means if it was like the last 2 years where you had 1 or 2 what we call bid thieves, Indiana State would have been in, which would have been a bit of a surprise. So, it just falls the way it falls. Whoever are the first teams out, and I know you're a big football guy. Yeah. When they go to 12 or 14, whatever the number is, whoever's left out is going to complain.
Of course, bubble teams will always, that's part of being on the bubble, as you point out, it's kind of the old football phrase, play, or basketball too, I guess it works, is play better than the ref's ref. Don't leave it up in the hands of anybody who is so-called objectively looking at something. Just keep winning, and then you take care of your business yourself. While we're in the weeds, before we just start looking at the bracket, a little bit larger view, Seth, What the hell is Kenpom, Seth? I mean, it just seems like every year.
I love you, man.
You know what I mean? Like, what the hell is that? I think I pay attention well enough, but it just seems that it used to be RPI was the newfangled thing years ago. What the hell is Kenpom, Seth?
Okay, Kenpom is actually a person.
Okay,
and his name is Ken Pomeroy.
Okay,
he's a former television weatherman, and he does an advanced metrics rating system based on efficiency. And by the way, when the Winter Olympics comes around, he also does it for curling.
Oh.
So if you ever need a curling expert, I will put you in touch with Ken Pomeroy.
Okay,
his website is called kenpom.com. So it's all based on efficiency. It's a brilliant website in terms of the metrics and the way that it's laid out. And it's really, I have to say, it's a gambling site. It sets point spreads, and all the books in Vegas use it, and people use it. And
right.
It's a very, what we call it, a predictive metric, because it measures efficiency and it factors in, who you're playing and strength of schedule and all that. So the RPI, the old RPI, used to only go by results, and it was heavily weighted towards your opponents and then your opponent's opponent. So it counted a 1-point win and a 40-point win the same. I actually had no problem with that, because that actually does count the same in the standings. You won the game, you lost the game.
Right.
You move on. But a lot of them, people out there said, well, you need to be a little bit more nuanced. So the NCAA said, okay, they went to Google. So their net ranking is more closely aligned with Kenpom. But it's at kenpom.com, and it's a great site for sussing all this stuff out if you really want to get into the weeds.
And it really is something that the selection committee used? That we're just talking about it in the media,
Well, yeah, both. I mean, it's the most cited. Coaches use it. Again, it's like, one team averages 80 points a game. One team averages 70 points a game. Who's the better offensive team? Well, the team that scores more. Well, but what if the team that scores more plays twice as fast, right? So it's points per possession is what Kenpom is based on. It, and it goes into, like if one team has 12 offensive rebounds a game, one team has 10 offensive rebounds a game. The one that has 12, but how many shots did they take? So it's offensive rebound percentage. So it's a very advanced and sophisticated, and it's just one of like a zillion analytics. So the committee looks at all of these metrics across the board, and they are useful in the sense because they all weigh different things. And if like a team is like, 30, 31, 38, but then 75 in one of these metrics, that just kind of gives them a little, keyhole that they can go into and dig deeper into the numbers.
Okay. So we're choosing NCAA tournament teams by Doppler radar now. I got it. Very good. Good to know. Hopefully,
at the end of the day, win enough and it doesn't matter.
That's
win the game.
I like it.
Win the game.
I'm hoping Kenpom was a good weatherman. That's all I'm saying.
You got to have him on for curling, Rich. I know you're a big curling guy.
I'm in.
I could see you.
I'm in.
We should be like the two Jewish guys with the broom and Fiddler on the Roof curling on the ice. That would be amazing. Can we do that, Rich?
Absolutely.
How hard can it be to do this?
It'll be in the Anatevka bracket in the region. Okay. We're really in the weeds now. Okay, so who are your final four, Seth? Who's your final four?
I hate myself for going chalk. Last year everything got blown up, but the year before was all blue blood. So I got UConn, Arizona, Houston, and Purdue. UConn and Houston have been the best teams in the country all season. Purdue has been right up there. They've lost some games that maybe make you worry. Maybe we're unfairly looking at that because of their recent NCAA tournament history, not just against FDU, but they've lost earlier than they should have the last couple of years, playing smaller, quicker teams. Houston and UConn, Houston has been number one at Kenpom for
nice.
most of the season. So, but Purdue, I picked Purdue. I went with my heart a little bit. Purdue this is school. They haven't been to a Final Four since 1980. And they're one of the great fan bases. And I love Zach Edey as a person and as a player. If you don't like Zach Edey, you need to reevaluate things in your life. This backlash with the fouling, they could call 3 times as many fouls as they do against this kid, the way that he gets clubbed. And I've seen a lot of their games in person. But I see 2 teams in the Midwest. If you were going to look for teams that Purdue doesn't want to play, and you got to beat somebody good to get to a Final Four no matter what, You would look for teams with dynamic scoring guards because their perimeter defense has been suspect. And then you'd want teams with good defensive centers to at least create a problem for Zach Edey. And then also teams that don't foul. Creighton is ranked number 1 on Kenpom in defensive free throw rate. They are the best team in the entire country at playing good defense without fouling. Now, they don't get steals, so that's their thing. We're not going to try, but their efficiency is really good, and they have one of the best defensive centers in the country in Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's also a really good offensive player, 7'1" center. So that, to me, and then Tennessee, obviously a dynamic offensive player in Dalton Knecht. I think Tennessee is actually relying too much on Knecht. You know, he had 40 when they played Kentucky at home, but they lost the game. So I think they're better off with Knecht getting 20 and winning the game. And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic for them going forward. You know, they lost early in the SEC tournament. Kentucky lost early. Houston lost by 20 points to Iowa State. Iowa State didn't do anybody a favor by making Houston angry going into the tournament. So I'm a little worried about Purdue, I'll be honest.
Who are your upsets that people might want to listen to and maybe sample when they're filling out their brackets, Seth?
Okay. Rich, you probably don't know this. Nobody knows this about me. This is just us. Yes. I went to Duke. Okay. I know nobody knows this. I'm going to reveal this now after 30 years in the industry. Yes. I've got James Madison over the Blue Devils in the Sweet 16. James Madison, first game of the year, they win at Michigan State. Everyone says, what's wrong with Michigan State? Well, James Madison was wrong with Michigan State. They actually ended up in the top 25 like their football team did. They've won 31 games, and they sailed through their tournament. Really well-coached team. My other upset specials were down in the Midwest. I got McNeese, coached by Will Wade. We remember him and how he flamed out at LSU, but no one ever criticizes his basketball coaching. It was the other stuff that got him in trouble. Again, they've won all year, and Wisconsin played well in the Big Ten tournament. They lost 8 of 11 at the end of the regular season. And that's something, by the way, for all you bracket filler outers out there, when you're looking for teams, especially the higher seeded teams, maybe to pick for upsets, look for teams that did well all season long. Grand Canyon. I like Grand Canyon in the Sweet 16.
Boy, you're liking all the 12s.
Alabama.
You like all the 12s, huh?
Well, the 12-5 is the classic upset. The 13-4 has also, there's going to be, and that leads me to Samford over Kansas. This may seem wackadoodle, but Kansas lost by 20 to Cincinnati in the Big 12 tournament. They lost 4 of the last 5 games because their best player, the best player in the Big 12, Kevin McCullough, has been struggling with a bone bruise in his knee, basically doesn't practice, has been in and out in terms of his game availability. And then at the end of the regular season, last game against Houston, Hunter Dickinson dislocated his shoulder, didn't play in the Big 12 tournament. Now, they say those guys are going to play, but Kansas already had no depth. They were basically only had 4 really good players, 4. And so they won a lot of games because they're a really good 4. They're going up against a team in Samford. Their head coach is a guy named Bucky McMillan, who got hired 4 years ago. He was coaching the high school down the street. Yeah. And Martin Newton hired him to be the head coach at Samford. They play Bucky ball, full court pressure. 12 guys play. They run, they gun, they shoot threes. And how's this for a kicker, Rich? The game is being played in Salt Lake City. Yeah. So altitude comes into play. So I got Samford over Kansas with McNeese going to the Sweet 16. I got James Madison in the Sweet 16. I got Grand Canyon in the Sweet 16. And then from there, it's pretty much a lot of chalk.
Yeah. So you've got Samford versus McNeese in a second round Salt Lake City match up. How about this one, too? Who's in Salt Lake City, but Long Beach State. What a story that they tell Dan Monson, you're out on a Monday, and he's cutting down the tournament nets to become the 15 seed on a weekend. That's nuts, Seth. Have you ever heard of anything? No. Has that ever happened? I mean,
I don't think it's ever happened. The reverse of that is, of course, is your alma mater in '89.
Right.
Yeah.
Where Steve Fisher gets the gig because Bo won't keep Bill Frieder in place. Yeah. You know, by the way, right. I guess the AD said, I'm not going to have a Long Beach guy coach a Long Beach team, right? Although the reverse to Bill Frieder left Michigan in '89, I guess, but Monson's given it. I've never heard anything like that, Seth.
Well,
right?
you know, so you say, why do you do this? You do this for this reason, because if you feel like you want to make a coaching change, if the guy makes the NCAA tournament, you can't fire him. basically, right? That doesn't mean, I mean, I guess you can do anything you want. So this is what they chose to do. It's an interesting time in the coaching business as a college coach and in any sport, but especially in basketball and football with the way things are going. You know, Dan Monson, people may remember, was the OG Slipper Still Fits coach at Gonzaga when they made their original Elite Eight. I think it was 1999, and then on the basis of that run, he got hired to go to Minnesota.
Right.
And Mark Few was his assistant coach on that team and took over, and the rest is history. So Dan Monson's a well thought of guy. He'll find work if he wants it, and it's a fun situation.
Well, maybe they go on a run and they say, you know, we never took our finger off the chess piece, you know, like we haven't. Right. It could be one of those.
If they want to change their mind, I'm sure he'd be willing to coach. He doesn't sound like a guy who doesn't want to coach anymore.
All right, I'm with you. Seth Davis here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the few minutes I have left with you, the success of the memoir of Rex Chapman that you've written with Rex. It is a New York Times bestseller right now. Are you walk me through, because he says that you basically told him this has to happen, Seth, that he was he was kind of thinking about maybe not doing it.
Well, sort of. I mean, I definitely knew he had an amazing book in him. So my thing with him was always, we talked about it. Well, maybe I'll think about it. I said, okay, I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it with you, but do not do this unless you are willing to be completely honest and completely forthcoming and not hold anything back. And by anything, I mean anything. Now, there were a couple of things we didn't put in there because of the impact it might have on someone else.
Right.
But I waited until, and I don't know if Rex, told you the story, but it was during the, people have talked about, obviously the addiction and depression and anxiety and all those things and attention deficit that played into it. But there's a lot of racial tension in this book. And it was during the George Floyd protest where I saw Rex do an interview where he made the comment, and he was emotional, and he made a comment, I never talked about these things because I was worried about it affecting my pocketbook, but now I'm ready to talk about it. And that's when I called him. I said, okay, let's go. And he really trusted me. And to be honest, Rich, if he knew remotely how painful the process was going to be, there's no way that he would have done it. There were a couple of times when I thought he was going to pull out, including as he was reading the final drafts, and he had a severe panic attack and ended up in the hospital. But I have to tell you, because of people like you and all of these interviews that he's been doing, it's been incredible. He's so filled with self-loathing, and he was so sure that everybody was going to hate him and judge him and castigate him and crucify him, and to see the love that's surrounded him and see the actual healing as he's talked about this over and over again. It's one thing, Rich, to say these things to a therapist once a month, and you're probably not even talking about that. You're probably talking about whatever with your therapist, but to put it in a book, to feel that vulnerability and then to talk about it and go there and to have his kids read it. See, I said, Rex, your kids are grown-ups, man. Like, it's just the truth. Right? Like, it's just the truth. So I'm super proud of him. I love him like a brother. And I really feel like, Rich, we did something great together. And I'm really proud of the book and gratified by the reception.
You should be, brother. And congratulations, to you as well. And then we'll put the picture up. I mean, this says it all, right? Look at that. I mean,
how about that?
I mean, LeBron holding it up. Look at that.
You see him pointing at my name? He's pointing right at my name. That's so intentional.
Yeah, he does. He's a pleaser. He's a pleaser, Seth. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Thank you.
All right. Before I let you go, two other things. What's my alma mater going to do now that Juwan Howard is out, and this has been an unfortunate ending to something that had so much promise at the beginning?
Yeah.
Who's Michigan going to hire, do you think, Seth?
I wish I had a good answer for you. I mean, there are no obvious candidates. I think this notion of having to stay within the family is often doesn't work. Sometimes it does work, but I don't think you should be limiting your pool. Look, the hot name on the coaching circuit is Dusty May. And a lot of us had Dusty ticketed for Ohio State. They've made their hire. And so now you have Louisville out there. Interestingly enough, a lot of basketball people will tell you Louisville's a better job because it is considered more of a basketball job. I think Michigan is a fantastic job. I think Dusty May would be a fantastic fit there. There's some big swing candidates. Kind of a dark horse might be Scott Drew. He's been at Baylor for 21 years. I look for guys who are not only good but have affordable buyouts. Mm-hmm. And his buyout is only like Nate Oates' buyout is prohibitive. Mick Cronin's is $20 million. It goes down to 16, but it's $20 million right now. TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State, his buyout is $16 million. Michigan is not. Nobody is paying that. Nobody's paying that. And another guy in that category who I think could do the job, who has a manageable buyout, is Jamie Dixon at TCU. So those would be three names that I would throw into the mix: Scott May, Jamie Dixon, and Scott Drew. I think you call Scott first and see if he might be interested. But besides that, you're looking at sort of the mid-major up-and-coming guys, the Nico Medveds of the world, the Darian DeVrieses of the world. I think we can kind of flush maybe forever the former NBA guy who's never coached in college coming back. What goes on between the lines in practice and during the game is never a problem for guys like Juwan Howard, Mike Woodson, Penny Hardaway, right on down the line. That's about 5% of the job right now, if that. It's all, you're a general manager. You're a CEO. You have to manage personalities, the portal, the recruiting, NIL, alums, the university, the fans. Like, it's a big job. The basketball part of it is only a small part of it. So you want to have somebody who culturally could be a good fit. Let me ask you this question.
Yes, Jeff.
As a Michigan alum, would you be excited about Dusty May?
Of course. I'm excited for, anything that wasn't this year. Honestly, I'm
talk about a low bar.
But it's all, I know, but it's really all, an unknown. You go with somebody else's track record and you feel like, again, if you had asked me years ago, are you psyched for John Beilein? I'm like, well, I mean, he spun some gold out of the pit snoggle straw. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, yeah. Like, and I wouldn't mind having him back if that's what he wants to do. And I also wouldn't mind, if you give Jay Wright a little bit of an elbow when you see him on the set, Seth, and say, those pinstripe suits would look good in Ann Arbor as well. Seth,
yeah, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you something. You never saw any human being happier than Jay Wright. Okay. He doesn't look. He's turned down more money than you and I will ever see. He's 61 years old.
Right.
He's attached to the game. He's involved in the game in his current role. He's amazing at it. He's an absolute mensch of a human being, and he loves being with his family. So my guess is he's coached his last game, but I've been wrong before.
Well, you're an absolute mensch as well, Seth. So I'm mandated to send you out the door by asking you who do you have winning it all? Who do you have?
I got UConn over Houston. How's that for a bold pick?
Wow, back to back. Well, it is bold though. I mean, for somebody to go back to back is pretty darn bold, regardless of how well they've looked all season long, Seth.
Yeah, and by the way, the only two teams since John Wooden did it were Duke and Florida. In both cases, to repeat, cases they basically brought back their entire team. UConn lost 3 starters and 5 over their top 8 scorers. And look where they are now. That's why Dan Hurley's my coach of the year. That's not even close.
He is amazing. Seth, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. Have a great March Madness, and we'll chat on the other side. You be well.
Love you, Rich. Appreciate you, man.
Right back at you. That is Seth Davis. Check him out on CBS and the family of March Madness networks as you get set for your bracketology right here on The Rich Eisen Show.